Now.
We begin tonight with developments in Washington over the spending deal to avert a government shutdown. The White House says President Trump will sign the bipartisan bill and will also declare a national emergency at the southern border. It was a surprise move. The majority leader made the announcement on the Senate floor. Senator McConnell added he plans to support the national emergency declaration after saying for weeks such a move would set a bad precedent for future administrations, something Speaker Pelosi also cautioned her colleagues about.
I know the Republicans have some unease about it no matter what they say, because if the president can declare an emergency on something that he has created as an emergency, an illusion that he wants to convey, just think of what a president with different values can present to the American people.
The move would allow the president to reallocate funds from the Department of Defense and elsewhere towards the border, but it is still unknown what projects the president plans to take that money from. While the move is sure to spur legal challenges, House Speaker Pelosi saying at this time they're simply reviewing all of their options. Canyon County Sheriff Donahue went to the White House this week to represent Idaho and talk border security at the National Sheriff's Association Conference. 6 on Your Side Steve Dent sat down with the sheriff to get his perspective on how border security affects Idaho.
Well, Don, the border between Mexico and the U.S. stretches nearly 2,000 miles, and currently there's 600 miles of fencing. Funding for the wall led to the longest government shutdown in United States history and is prompting sheriffs from across the country to speak out, including Canyon County Sheriff Donahue.
It's the sheriffs throughout our nation that whatever crosses that border comes to their jurisdiction, just like here in the Treasure Valley.
Sheriff Donahue was one of 16 sheriffs who met with President Trump at the White House this week.
We need that physical barrier. People say, well, how's that going to help? Well, it's not just the barrier itself. That's one leg of the stool. We got him too.
That works in conjunction with Border Patrol agents and the technology they use to attempt to protect our border.
The cartels aren't stupid. I've seen it. They're very smart. They're very sophisticated. They're operating a hundreds of billion-dollar industry a year. Hundreds of billion, not million. You think they're going to give that up? Everything is about making money, the cash.
Which comes from trafficking humans and drugs, which Donahue says eventually ends up in Idaho.
How bad is the drug trade here? Let me explain that. In the United States, there are 29 designated, Department of Justice designated, high-intensity drug trafficking areas. 29 in the United States. We're one of those 29. I'm certainly not against immigration, right? I believe we're all immigrants. We came here, but there has to be a better system in place.
And there aren't enough resources to go around. Sheriff Donahue learned in D.C. that 150 agents
she said because of the gangs that she wants a better life for her daughter.
Are working to provide people with medical care on the southern border.
It's incredibly sad. It's a human tragedy, right? And it's a humanitarian crisis. It truly is.
And I know from living down in Arizona, I shot this video a few years ago, and people die in the Sonoran Desert all the time because they're so desperate to escape the lives they live in Mexico and Central America. Steve Dent, 6 on Your Side.
More news coming up in just a moment.